I was nobody, just a maid polishing marble in a mansion built on blood money, until three men left me bleeding in an alley and my boss asked one question. What happened to you? His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of quiet that comes before executions. By dawn, those men had vanished, and I realized the most dangerous thing in New York wasn't the mafia boss who killed for power. It was the one who'd killed for me. But let me go back to before everything burned down. 8 months I'd worked inside the Lucero mansion. 8 months of moving like smoke through rooms that cost more than my entire life. I wiped down glass tables until my reflection vanished into the shine. I vacuumed Persian rugs older than my grandmother. I folded towels that felt softer than anything I'd ever own. The work was simple. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, don't look anyone in the eye too long. Especially not him, Adrian Lucero. Even his name felt dangerous to say out loud. The other staff whispered it like a prayer or a curse depending on the day. By daylight, he was the businessman whose signature appeared on charity checks and real estate deals. By night, he was the shadow the NYPD pretended not to see. The man who owned half of Manhattan without anyone daring to ask how. To me, he was Mr. Lucero, the man whose footsteps I learned to recognize 3 hallways away. The one whose coffee I poured at exactly 6:47 a.m., black, no sugar, in the blue porcelain cup he never thanked me for. I was good at being invisible. I had to be. My mother's hospital bills didn't care about my exhaustion. $46,800 in debt that clung to me like wet clothes. So I worked doubles when they offered. I skipped lunch to save $7. I took the subway home instead of the bus to save another $2. At night, I'd collapse into my cramped Bronx apartment where my younger sister Camelia would be sprawled on the couch, half asleep with her phone glowing in her hand. "You look dead," she'd say without looking up. "I'm fine." "You're 27, not 70. You should be out living, not scrubbing some rich guy's floors." I never had the energy to argue. Dreams were a luxury I couldn't afford. Bills were real. Rent was real. Everything else was just noise. The Lucero estate sat on the edge of the Hudson River, all glass and marble and cold, perfect lines. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine, beautiful and untouchable. At night, the chandeliers glowed like trapped stars, and the silence pressed down so heavy you could feel it in your chest. Everyone who worked there knew the rules. Speak only when spoken to, don't linger, and never, never make yourself memorable. I was excellent at that, until I wasn't. It was a Friday in October when everything cracked open. I'd stayed late to finish polishing the second-floor library, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the river. By the time I clocked out, the rain had started. Heavy, angry drops that turned the streets slick and dark. I pulled my jacket tighter and started the walk to the subway. 3 blocks, that's all it was supposed to be. The first shadow moved near the lamppost. Then another. I told myself it was nothing, just people, just the city. But my heartbeat knew better. It kicked hard against my ribs, a warning I didn't want to hear. I walked faster. So did they. The alley opened up beside me like a mouth, and before I could turn, a hand clamped down on my shoulder and yanked me sideways. My bag hit the pavement. My phone skittered into a puddle. "Easy now," one of them said, his breath sour and close. "Just give us what you got." I tried to speak, but fear had swallowed my voice. Then the second man saw it, the small silver L embroidered in the sleeve of my gray uniform, Adrian Lucero's insignia. His smile twisted into something uglier. "Nice uniform, sweetheart," he rasped, leaning closer. "You work for him?" The air shifted, colder, meaner. I shook my head, gasping, "No, I just clean." She's one of Lucero's, the other man said, and his voice carried a cruelty that made my stomach drop.
They didn't want my money anymore. They wanted to send a message. The next sound was the rain, masking the first blow. The first punch landed above my left eye, and the world exploded into white light and ringing silence. I didn't scream. Couldn't. The air had been knocked out of me before I even understood what was happening. My knees buckled, and suddenly I was on the ground, wet pavement biting into my palms. "Please," I tried to say, but a boot caught my ribs, cutting the word in half. One of them laughed. Not the kind of laugh you hear at a joke, the kind that comes from somewhere dark and broken inside a person. "Lucero's girl thinks she can beg?" he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "I'm not—" Another blow, this one to my shoulder. "I'm just the help." But it didn't matter. They weren't listening anymore. The kicks came faster now, deliberate, controlled. They knew exactly where to hit to make it hurt without making it quick. My ribs screamed, my head throbbed, blood filled my mouth, copper and warm, mixing with rain that poured down like the sky itself was crying. "Tell your boss," one of them hissed, crouching down so his face was inches from mine, "that Queens doesn't forget, and neither does Darius Novak." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, like a threat, like a promise, told me it should. Then they were gone, footsteps fading into the storm, laughter swallowed by thunder. I lay there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, rain hammering down on me, soaking through my uniform, my skin, my bones. The alley smelled like garbage and old grease, and something metallic that I realized with a sick lurch was my own blood pooling beneath my cheek. "Get up," I tried to say, but my body didn't want to move. Every breath felt like glass scraping against my lungs. Finally, I rolled onto my side, groaning as pain shot through my ribs. I pressed one hand against the dumpster and dragged myself upright, shaking so hard my teeth clattered together. The walk home was a blur. 2 blocks, then 3. I kept one hand pressed against the brick walls to steady myself, leaving smears of blood behind like breadcrumbs. People passed me, umbrellas up, heads down, pretending not to see. No one stopped. By the time I reached my apartment building, my vision was tunneling, the edges going soft and gray. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them twice, finally got the door open. "Elena?" Camila's voice cut through the fog. She was on the couch, still in her work clothes from the Lucero kitchen, her phone in her hand. When she looked up and saw me, her face went white. "Oh my God!" She scrambled up, rushing over. "What happened? Who did this?" "I'm fine," I whispered, even though we both knew it was a lie. "You're not fine. We need to call the police." "No!" The word came out sharper than I meant it to. "No police. Please, Camila. Just help me clean up." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but calling the cops meant questions. Questions meant explanations. Explanations meant admitting I worked for Adrian Lucero. And that opened doors I didn't know how to close. Camila bit her lip, then nodded. Okay, come on." She helped me to the bathroom, eased me down onto the edge of the tub. The mirror showed me a stranger, swollen eye, split lip, bruises already darkening across my cheekbone like storm clouds. Camila worked in silence, dabbing at the cuts with the wet towel, her hands gentle but shaking. When she pressed too hard on a gash above my eyebrow, I hissed in pain. "Sorry," she whispered. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault." "Who were they?" "I don't know." And that was the truth. I didn't know their faces, didn't know their names, but I knew why. That embroidered L on my sleeve,
That stupid, meaningless logo that marked me as something I wasn't. Property, leverage, a message.
Later, when the bleeding had stopped and Camila had finally gone to bed, I lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the city hum outside my window. Sirens wailed somewhere far away, car horns blared. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. My body ached, but worse than that was the weight pressing down on my chest, the realization that someone, somewhere, had wanted me to suffer, not because of anything I'd done, but because of who I worked for. I was collateral damage in a war I didn't even know was happening. Sleep came in broken pieces, nightmares bleeding into reality. I dreamed of fists and laughter and rain that tasted like blood. What I didn't see, what I couldn't have known, was the black car parked across the street, its engine idling, its headlights dark. Inside, a man sat perfectly still, watching my window. When he was sure I was safe inside, the headlights blinked once, a signal to someone unseen. Then the car pulled away into the night, silent as a promise. I woke up to pain. Not the dull ache you can ignore, but the kind that screams with every breath, every movement, every thought. My left eye was swollen nearly shut. My ribs felt like broken piano keys. When I tried to sit up, the room spun. Camila was already gone, early shift at the mansion's kitchen. She'd left a note on the counter, "Stay home, please." I crumpled it up and threw it away. Debt didn't care if I was hurting. The hospital bills didn't pause because I'd been beaten in an alley. Rent was due in 8 days, and I was already behind. So I got dressed. Slowly. Each button on my uniform felt like a small war. I covered the bruises with makeup, foundation thick enough to hide the purple blooming across my cheekbone, concealer dabbed carefully over the cut above my eyebrow. In the mirror, I looked almost normal. Almost. The subway ride to the mansion was a blur of fluorescent lights and strangers' faces. No one looked at me. Good. That's how I needed it. By the time I arrived, the morning sun was slicing through the Lucero estate's glass walls, turning everything into sharp, blinding angles. I clocked in through the service entrance, kept my head down, and headed straight for the second-floor library. If I could just make it through the day without anyone noticing... Elena? I froze. Mrs. Reyes, the head housekeeper, stood in the hallway, her eyes narrowing as she took in my face. "What happened to you?" "I fell," I said quickly, too quickly, "down the subway steps. I'm fine." She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't push. "Be careful," she said finally. "Mr. Lucero doesn't like disruptions." I nodded and escaped into the library before she could ask anything else. The room smelled like leather and old paper, and the faint trace of cologne that meant he'd been here recently. I grabbed the duster and started working, focusing on the motion, the rhythm, anything to keep my mind from replaying last night. I was halfway through the second shelf when I heard footsteps. Not the soft shuffle of staff, the measured, deliberate stride of someone who owned every inch of ground they walked on. Adrian Lucero. My stomach dropped. He stepped into the library, jacket draped over one arm, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His dark hair was perfectly combed back, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, cold, sharp, calculating, missed nothing. He stopped when he saw me. The air shifted, tightened. For a long moment, he just stared, not at me, at my face, at the bruise I thought I'd hidden, at the cut I'd tried to cover. "What happened to you?" It wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in 4 quiet words. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I fell, Mr. Lucero. It's nothing." Silence. He didn't blink, didn't move, just kept staring at me with those glass-sharp eyes that seemed to cut through every lie I'd ever told. Try again. My throat went dry. Who did this? The air felt electric now, charged with something dangerous. Not anger, at least not the kind that exploded. This was colder, more controlled. The kind of rage that didn't need to raise its voice because it knew exactly how much power it held. I shook my head. It was nothing. Just nothing? He took a step closer. Not threatening, but the space between us seemed to hum with tension. Someone put their hands on you and you call it nothing? How did he know? How could he possibly? I don't want any trouble, I whispered. His jaw tightened. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Something raw and almost human before the mask snapped back into place. Where did it happen? Mr. Lucero, please. Where? I flinched. Not from fear of him, but from the weight of his attention. The realization that Adrian Lucero, the man I'd spent 8 months avoiding, the man whose world I cleaned but never touched, was looking at me like I mattered. 3 blocks from here, I finally admitted, my voice barely audible. Friday night, they saw the uniform. His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Did they say anything? I hesitated. A name, Darius Novak. The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your bones. Then Adrian turned and walked out. No goodbye, no reassurance, just gone. But as he disappeared into the hallway, I heard it, his voice, low and lethal, drifting back through the open door. Mateo. I crept closer, pulse hammering. Down in the foyer, Adrian stood perfectly still, phone passed to his ear. His lieutenant, Mateo Vargas, the man everyone whispered about with equal parts respect and terror, must have answered immediately. Adrian's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind that comes before storms. Find out who touched her. A pause. I want names, addresses, where they eat, where they sleep, who they love. Another pause, shorter this time, and Mateo. His tone dropped lower, colder, final. Make sure they know I'm coming. That night, Manhattan didn't sleep. I didn't know it then, didn't understand that while I was lying in my cramped apartment, staring at water stains on the ceiling, the entire underworld was shifting beneath the city like tectonic plates before an earthquake. Phone lines buzzed, text messages burned through encrypted apps. In basement bars and backroom offices, men who thought themselves untouchable suddenly remembered what fear tasted like. Adrian Lucero's name moved through the darkness like a blade. By Sunday morning, 2 men were missing. By Monday afternoon, nobody dared ask where they'd gone. I went back to work that week, moving through the mansion like I always had, invisible, silent, careful, but something had changed. The other staff looked at me differently now, not with pity, with something else, something that felt like caution. On Tuesday, I was dusting the hallway outside the security office when I heard voices, low, urgent. I should have kept walking, should have minded my business like I'd been trained to do. Instead, I stopped. Surgical, one of the guards was saying. Miguel, I think, the older one with the scar across his knuckles. Didn't leave a trace, no bodies, no witnesses, just gone. How many? The second guard asked. 3 so far, maybe 4. Word is Lucero's people swept through Queens like ghosts, hit every spot connected to the alley thing. My breath caught. All this over a maid? The second guard's voice carried disbelief. Not just any maid. Miguel's tone dropped lower. The one Novak's boys touched. He went hunting, man. Full-scale retribution.
The kind that makes people remember why you don't test the Lucero family. The hallway seemed to tilt. My hand tightened around the duster until my knuckles went white. Novak must be losing his mind, the second guard muttered. Novak's gone quiet. That's worse. When a man like that goes quiet, it means he's either planning something big or realizing he made a mistake he can't undo. I forced myself to move, to walk away before they noticed me standing there, eavesdropping on a conversation that wasn't meant for my ears. But their words followed me like shadows. All this over a maid. He went hunting. For her. My stomach twisted into knots. Guilt and something else, something dangerous that felt uncomfortably like safety, tangled together until I couldn't separate them. 3 men, maybe 4, gone, because of me. Because they'd seen a logo on my sleeve and decided I was worth hurting. I should have felt horrified, should have been terrified of what Adrian Lucero was capable of. Instead, all I felt was the ghost of that question, what happened to you? And the realization that he hadn't asked for my sake. He'd asked because someone had dared to touch something he considered under his protection. I wasn't sure which thought scared me more. That night, I couldn't sleep. Camila was out with friends, and the apartment felt too quiet, too small, the walls pressing in like a coffin. I stood by the window looking out over the Bronx, streetlights cutting through the darkness, distant sirens wailing their endless song. Somewhere out there, men were disappearing. Families were getting phone calls that would never be answered. The city's underworld was learning a lesson written in blood and silence. And at the center of it all was a man in a marble mansion who'd looked at my bruised face and decided the world needed to burn. Across the river, Manhattan's skyline glowed gold and sharp against the night. I could almost feel it, the pulse of power, the hum of danger, the weight of Adrian Lucero's fury reshaping the city block by block. In Queens, Darius Novak sat in his office, phone silent on his desk, the message received loud and clear. He'd wanted to test whether the Lucero empire had gone soft, wanted to see if Adrian still had teeth. He got his answer. Now he had to decide whether to retaliate or retreat. Either way, the game had changed. The maid he used as a pawn had become the queen. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging the window. "What have you done, Mr. Lucero?" I whispered into the darkness. In the distance, sirens screamed. Red and blue lights painted the night. And somewhere in that city of glass and shadow, I knew he was awake too, watching, waiting, making sure the message had been received. Don't touch what's mine. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it wrapped around me like armor. A week passed, like holding your breath underwater.
I kept my head down, my uniform pressed, my hands busy. But no matter where I was in the mansion, polishing silver in the dining room, vacuuming the third-floor guest suites, folding linens in the laundry, I could feel him. Not physically. Adrian Lucero didn't follow me around, didn't watch me work, but his presence lived in the spaces between things, in the echo of footsteps 2 hallways over, in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, in the weight of attention I couldn't see but somehow always felt. The other staff noticed, too. They gave me space now, like I carried something contagious. Even Camila, who worked in the kitchen and usually had no filter, tiptoed around me. "You okay?" she'd ask Tuesday night over leftover takeout. "Fine." "You sure? Because people are talking." "I'm fine, Camila." She'd backed off, but the worry never left her eyes.
Thursday afternoon, I was restocking cleaning supplies in the second-floor utility closet when Mrs. Radice found me. "Mr. Lucero wants to see you," she said, her tone carefully neutral. My stomach dropped. "Why?" He didn't say. His office, now. The walk down the marble hallway felt endless. My heart hammered against my ribs, each step amplifying the silence. I'd worked here 8 months and never once been summoned to his office. Staff didn't get summoned. Staff stayed invisible. The door was already open when I arrived. Adrian sat behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reviewing something on his laptop. He didn't look up when I knocked. "Come in. Close the door." I obeyed, my hands trembling as I shut the heavy door behind me. The click of the latch sounded too loud, too final. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Lucero." He closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair, finally looked at me. Those eyes, dark, sharp, unreadable, swept over my face. The bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows. The cut above my eyebrow was healing into a thin pink line. "You shouldn't have come back so soon," he said quietly. "I needed the job." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "The job?" A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not cruel, something else, almost amused. "You think this is still about the job?" The air between us felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I didn't know how to answer, didn't know what he wanted me to say. "I don't understand," I whispered. He stood, walked around the desk slowly, deliberately, until he was standing 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, expensive. "You should be afraid of me." "I know, but you're not." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. For a long moment, we just stood there, the silence humming between us like an exposed wire. His mask, the cold, untouchable one, slipped just enough for me to see beneath it. Not the king of Manhattan's underworld, not the man whose name made people vanish. Just a man, haunted, alone, someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to care about anything that couldn't be controlled or bought. "Why did you do it? Those men, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because they touched what was mine." "I'm not—"
You work in my house, under my roof. That makes you mine to protect. His voice was low, controlled, but something simmered beneath the surface. No one gets to hurt you and walk away from it. No one. My breath caught. The way he said it, not possessive exactly, but absolute, like a law of physics. Gravity, inevitability. "I never asked you to—" "You didn't have to." The silence stretched. I should have left. Should have thanked him and walked out and gone back to being invisible. Instead, I stayed. "Are you afraid of what I'm capable of?" he asked. I thought about the men who disappeared, about the sirens and the whispers and the way the entire city seemed to hold its breath around his name. "Yes," I admitted. "Good." He stepped back, putting distance between us again. The mask slid back into place, smooth and impenetrable. "You can go." I turned toward the door, my legs unsteady. "Elena." I stopped. It was the first time he'd ever said my name. "If anyone ever touches you again," he said quietly, "you tell me immediately. Understood?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left. The hallway felt colder, emptier. I made it halfway to the service stairs before I had to stop and lean against the wall, my pulse racing, my mind spinning. What just happened? Down the hall, near the security office, Mateo Vargas stood in the shadows,
arms crossed, watching me with those cold, calculating eyes. When I passed him, he didn't move, didn't speak. But later, after I'd gone, he walked into Adrian's office without knocking. "She's not just staff anymore, is she?" Mateo said. Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the city. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "I need a favor." Adrian's voice was calm, clinical, like he was asking me to polish a table instead of turning my entire world sideways. It was Friday evening. I'd just finished my shift and was heading toward the service exit when he appeared in the hallway, blocking my path, without actually moving closer. "A favor?" I repeated carefully. "Business dinner tonight. Manhattan. I need someone—" He paused, choosing his words with the precision of a surgeon. "Presentable. Someone who won't ask questions." My stomach nodded. "I don't understand." "You will. 8 o'clock. Wear something appropriate." He turned to leave, then stopped. "My assistant left a dress in the guest suite, 3rd floor. It should fit." Before I could argue, before I could ask, "Why me?" or "What's really happening?" he was gone. The dress was simple, black, elegant in a way that made me feel like I was wearing someone else's skin. It fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Camila had nearly lost her mind when I told her. "He's taking you to dinner?" "Dinner? Elena, what is happening?" "I don't know. This isn't normal. This isn't—" "I know." I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. "But I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice." Did I? With $46,800 in debt and a job that kept the lights on, did I really? The car arrived at exactly 8. Black, sleek, expensive enough to make me feel guilty just sitting in it. Adrian was already inside, reviewing something on his phone. He glanced up when I slid into the seat beside him, his expression unreadable. "You look acceptable," he said. "Not good, not beautiful, acceptable." I didn't know whether to be offended or relieved. The restaurant was the kind of place I'd only seen in magazines. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths so crisp they could cut, servers who moved like ghosts, everyone dressed like they owned pieces of the city, which I realized with growing dread they probably did. Adrian's hand settled lightly on the small of my back as we entered. Not possessive, guiding, but every person in that room noticed. We were seated at a private table near the back, tucked into an alcove that felt both intimate and exposed. 3 other men were already there, suits perfectly tailored, watches glinting in the low light. And across from Adrian, smirking like a predator who'd just cornered his prey, sat Darius Novak. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a declaration of war disguised as civility. "Adrian," Novak drawled, his voice smooth as poison. "Always a pleasure." "Darius." Adrian's tone was flat, empty. Novak's eyes slid to me, lingered. "And who's this?" "Elena," Adrian said simply. "Charming." Novak leaned back, swirling wine in his glass. "Your staff seem well-kept. Must be expensive, maintaining such high standards." The air tightened. Every man at the table felt it. Adrian's jaw tensed, just barely. "I keep what's mine safe." The words landed like a gunshot wrapped in silk. Novak's smirk widened. "Of course you do. Though one wonders if such investments are worth the cost, especially when they attract unwanted attention." I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never come back, but Adrian's hand found mine beneath a table, his grip steady, grounding. A warning, or a promise, maybe both. "Investments pay off," Adrian said quietly. When you know their value, some men make the mistake of underestimating worth. They don't usually make that mistake twice. The threat was subtle, precise, lethal. Novak's smile never faltered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Wise words. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and food I couldn't taste. Every word felt loaded, every glance sharp enough to draw blood. By the time we left, rain was beginning to fall, tapping against the restaurant's glass walls like impatient fingers. In the car, the silence felt heavier than before. "You used me," I said finally. Adrian didn't deny it. Yes. Why? Because Novak needed to see that what he tried to break is still standing, that I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw something raw beneath the mask. Not anger, something more dangerous. "You were never supposed to be part of this world, Elena." "Too late for that now," I whispered. His gaze held mine. "Yes, it is." The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a heartbeat. Neither of us spoke again until the car pulled up to my apartment. As I stepped out, Adrian's voice stopped me.
"He'll come for you now. You understand that?" I did. "What do I do?" "You stay close, and you trust me." I should have said no. Should have walked away while I still could. Instead, I nodded. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Queens, Darius Novak stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "He brought her," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction. "The maid. Front and center, like a goddamn trophy." A pause. "He's losing control over a maid." Novak's laugh was cold, calculating. "And when a man like Adrian Lucero loses control, he becomes predictable." Another pause. "Oh, I'm sure. This isn't about business anymore. It's personal. And personal," he smiled into the darkness, "personal is where men make mistakes." He ended the call. Outside, the rain fell harder. And somewhere in the city, Elena Cruz lay awake, wondering if she'd just become the most dangerous piece on a chessboard she didn't know she was playing on. The mansion knew before we did. Whispers moved through the corridors like smoke. Staff conversations died when I entered rooms. Eyes followed me, not with judgment, exactly, but with something careful, cautious, like I'd become something fragile and explosive all at once. "Did you hear?" "Saw them at dinner." "Never takes anyone." "She's just a maid." "Not anymore." I kept my head down and worked, polished surfaces that didn't need polishing, vacuumed carpets already spotless, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. But it didn't matter, because every time I turned a corner, I felt him. Not physically there, but present somehow. In the weight of silence, in the echo of footsteps that stopped just before reaching me, in the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Adrian had disappeared into his study. For 3 days he barely emerged. Mateo came and went with files and hushed conversations. Mrs. Reyes delivered meals that came back untouched. "He's brooding," Camila whispered one afternoon in the kitchen. "That's what Marco said. Locked himself in there like he's trying to figure out a problem he can't solve." I didn't ask what problem. I already knew. Thursday evening, the storm came. Not gradually, all at once. The sky split open, rain hammering against the mansion's glass walls like it wanted in. Thunder rolled across the Hudson, deep and ominous. I was in the second-floor hallway when the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Emergency lighting kicked in after a moment, dim, ghostly, but half the mansion remained draped in shadow. "Great," I muttered, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. The balcony doors down the hall were banging open, curtains whipping in the wind. Rain poured in, soaking the hardwood floors.
I ran toward them, shoes slipping on wet wood. The wind fought me as I grabbed the door handles, pulling with everything I had. My uniform was drenched within seconds, hair plastered to my face, rain stinging my eyes. Finally, the doors slammed shut. I stood there, panting, dripping water on the floor, trying to catch my breath. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. Adrian stood in the shadows at the end of the hall, barely visible in the emergency lighting. His shirt was half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, tie gone. He looked undone in a way I'd never seen. Hair slightly mussed, jaw tight, eyes carrying something raw and dangerous. "The doors were open," I said, my voice shaking. You're soaked. So are you." He stepped closer. Not quickly, deliberately, each footfall echoing in the darkness. Lightning cracked outside, flooding the hallway with white light for a split second. In that brief flash, I saw his face clearly. The exhaustion, the war behind his eyes, the careful control barely holding. "You should go home," he said quietly. "So should you. This is my home." "Is it? Or is it just a place you hide?" His jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I took a step toward him. Reckless, stupid. "You hide behind walls and silence and power. You make people disappear because it's easier than letting anyone close. You stop." "Why?" "Because the truth hurts. Because you have no idea what I am. I know exactly what you are. And I'm still here." The silence that followed felt like falling. Thunder rumbled, rain battered the windows, emergency lights flickered. And then he was right there, close enough that I could feel the heat coming off him, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "You should be terrified of me," he said, his voice rough. "I know. You should run." "I know. Elena, neither should you be here, with me, like this. But you are." Something in him broke. Or maybe ignited. His hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw, tilting my face toward his. The touch was hesitant, careful, like I might shatter. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "Probably." Lightning flashed again. In its glow, I saw his eyes. Not cold, not controlled, but burning. "Tell me to stop," he said. I didn't. The kiss happened in the space between thunder and silence, soft at first, testing like we were both afraid of what it meant, then deeper, desperate. His hand tangled in my wet hair, my fingers gripped his short. The world narrowed to just this, rain and darkness and the taste of something forbidden finally breaking free. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back in. "This can't happen," he said, but his forehead was still pressed against mine. "I know. You work for me. I know. Novak will use this. He'll—" Adrian stopped, pulled back slightly. "You need to leave, now. Before—" A flash of light cut through the windows. Not lightning. We both turned toward the glass. Down by the gates, a black SUV sat idling, its headlights pointed directly at the mansion like eyes in the dark. Adrian's entire body went rigid. "Mateo," he said into his phone, already dialing. "We have company. Eastgate, run the plates." He listened, his jaw clenched tighter. "Novak's people," he said quietly. Then, to me, "Go. Service entrance. Now." "Adrian!" "Now, Elena." The command in his voice left no room for argument. I ran. But as I fled down the darkened hallway, I could feel it, the weight of what we'd just done settling over both of us like smoke. We'd crossed a line. And outside, in the rain, in the shadows beyond the gates, someone was watching. Someone who now knew exactly how to hurt Adrian Lucero. I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. 17 missed calls, 32 texts, most from numbers I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I scrolled through them, my stomach dropping with each message. Is this you? OMG, Elena, are you okay? Girl, what have you done? Then I saw the photo. Grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Me, leaving the Lucero mansion at 11:47 p.m., hair still wet from the storm, uniform clinging to my body, and in the background, barely visible through the glass doors, Adrian watching me leave. The timestamp was from last night. My throat closed, the room tilted. Someone had been watching, waiting. And now the photo was everywhere, sent to staff group chats, posted on gossip forums, whispered about in texts that would reach every corner of Manhattan's underworld by morning. Camilla burst into my room without knocking, her face pale. Adrian, what the hell is happening? People are talking. They're saying you and Lucero... She stopped, reading my expression. Oh God, it's true? Camilla, are you insane? Do you know what this means? What he is? I know what he is. Then you know this can't end well. Her voice cracked. These people don't love Elena. They own. And when someone tries to take what they own, her phone buzzed. Then mine, then hers again. The notifications came in waves, relentless as a flood. At the mansion, chaos had already erupted. I learned later, from Matea's clipped testimony, from the silence that followed, that Adrian saw the photo at 6:23 a.m. Someone had sent it directly to his private line with a message. Your staff seem well kept indeed, DN. Darius Novak. By 6:30, every screen in Adrian's study had been swept to the floor, glass shattered, wood splintered. The cold, controlled man who ruled Manhattan with surgical precision had detonated. Mateo found him standing in the wreckage, hands braced against his desk, breathing like he'd run a marathon. He's baiting you, Mateo said carefully. This is exactly what Novak wants. He's trying to prove you've gone soft, that you'll burn your empire over a... Finish that sentence, and you'll regret it. Mateo went quiet.
He put a target on her, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. The moment he leaked that photo, he told every rival, every ambitious lieutenant, every desperate crew looking to make a name. He stopped, exhaled. He made her a weakness, a vulnerability, something they can use. So what do you want to do? Adrian looked up. His eyes were black glass, empty of everything except purpose. I want to remind this city what happens when someone touches what's mine. By noon, Adrian's convoy rolled through Queens like a funeral procession. 4 black SUVs, no sirens, no warning, just the quiet inevitability of a storm that had finally been unleashed. Novak's club sat on a corner lot, neon sign buzzing even in daylight. Velvet Room, it read, a place where deals were made and bodies disappeared. Adrian walked in through the front door, no masks, no subtlety, just him and 6 men who moved like shadows. The music cut out, conversations died. Every person in that room felt the shift in air pressure, the moment before an execution. Novak sat in the back booth, surrounded by his crew, smirking like he'd been waiting for this. Adrian, he said smoothly, to what do I owe the... Adrian put a gun on the table. Not pointed, just there. An offering. A promise. You wanted to see if I'd gone soft. You wanted to know if I still had teeth. He leaned forward, voice dropping to something colder than winter. Look closer. Novak's smirk faltered, just slightly. This is about the girl? He laughed, sharp, cruel. You're willing to start a war over a cleaning girl? I'm willing to end one.
The shot rang out before anyone could move. Novak's head snapped back, his body crumpled, the smirk frozen on his face like a photograph. Silence. Then chaos. Novak's men reached for weapons. Adrian's men were faster. Gunfire cracked through the air, quick, efficient, surgical. Within 30 seconds, it was over. Adrian stood in the center of the wreckage, his gun still in his hand, blood spattered across his white shirt like abstract art. Mateo appeared at his elbow. "We need to move, now." But Adrian didn't move. He stared down at Novak's body, his expression empty. "Anyone else?" he called out to the room. "Anyone else want to test me?" No one answered. "Good." He turned toward the door. "Clean this up, and make sure every crew in this city knows, you touch her, you answer to me." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights painting the buildings. Adrian climbed into the SUV, his hands steady despite the blood. Mateo slid in beside him, silent. As the convoy pulled away, Adrian stared out at the city, his city, built on violence and silence and the kind of power that didn't ask permission. "It's done," he whispered. But both men knew the truth. It wasn't done. It was just beginning, because the moment you declare war for love, you've already lost the one thing that made you untouchable: your control. And somewhere in the Bronx, Elena Cruz sat on her apartment floor, phone buzzing endlessly, wondering if safety was worth the price of being owned by a man who'd burn the world to keep her.
By dawn, Manhattan knew. The news didn't come through headlines or police reports. It moved the way everything in the underworld moves, through whispers, through silence, through the sudden absence of men who'd been untouchable yesterday. Darius Novak was dead. His entire crew scattered or gone. And Adrian Lucero's message had been delivered in blood and bullets: "Don't touch what's mine." Every rival boss went to ground. Meetings were canceled, territories went uncontested, the city's underworld held its breath, waiting to see if the war would spread or if Lucero's fury had been satisfied. I heard it on the news first: a shooting in Queens, multiple casualties, no suspects in custody, but I knew. The moment I saw the location flash across the screen, I knew. Camila tried to stop me at the door. "Elena, don't. Whatever you're thinking, I have to see him. He just killed people, multiple people. I know what he is. I've always known." "Then why are you going back?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, and I was too afraid to say it out loud. The mansion felt different when I arrived. Colder, quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath. Mrs. Reyes wasn't at her usual post. The staff corridors were empty. Even the security cameras seemed to watch with more intensity. I found him in his study. The door was half open, dim light spilling into the darkened hallway. I knocked softly, but he didn't answer. He sat behind his desk, tie loosened, shirt still stained with blood he hadn't bothered to change. His hands rested on the armrests, perfectly still, but his eyes were somewhere else entirely. Empty, haunted. "Adrian?" I whispered. He looked up slowly, like waking from a dream he couldn't escape. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice hoarse. "Neither should you. Not like this." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The room smelled like whiskey and smoke and something metallic I didn't want to name. "You shouldn't have done that for me," I said, my throat tight. "He didn't do it for you." His gaze pinned me in place. "I did it because they touched what was mine." The word hung between us, mine, like a chain, a promise, a threat. Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm not a possession." "No." He stood slowly, exhaustion weighing down every movement. "You're worse. You're the thing I can't control, can't predict, can't lock away in a vault and forget about." He took a step toward me. "You're the crack in the foundation, Elena, and I've spent my entire life making sure there were no cracks." "Then why?" I broke my voice. "Why do this? Why burn everything down for someone like me?" "Because you're not like anyone." He stopped in front of me.
close enough that I could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the war behind his eyes. You look at me like I'm human, not a king, not a monster, just a man. And I haven't been just a man in so long I forgot what it felt like. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. I never asked to belong to your world. You didn't have to. His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd done. The moment you walked into my house, the moment you survived what they did to you and still came back, he stopped, exhaled. You were already mine. I just didn't know it yet. My breath caught. Who happened to you, Adrian? He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw him completely. Not the facade, not the power, just the man underneath, stripped bare and bleeding.
You did, he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like surrender. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the skyline, golden and soft against the smoke still rising from Queens. The city stretched out below us, glittering and dangerous, and ours in a way that would never be safe. I stepped closer. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me like I was the only solid thing left in his world. This can't end well, I whispered against his chest. I know. People will come for us, for you. Let them. I pulled back just enough to see his face. You'd really burn it all down? Everything you've built? His answer was immediate, absolute. Yes. And I believed him. Because love, like power, always demands a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. 3 months later, the mansion still stood. Adrian still ruled. But everything had changed. I didn't clean anymore, didn't hide in corridors or keep my head down. I stood beside him at dinners, walked through his world with my chin up, learned the language of power and silence. Camila thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But when I woke up in the middle of the night and found Adrian watching me like I might disappear, when he kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're safe," I knew the truth. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was survival wrapped in devotion, protection disguised as possession, love built on violence in the promise that he'd destroy anyone who tried to take me away. Was it healthy? Probably not. Was it real? Terrifyingly so. And when I looked out over the city at dawn, watching the light chase away the shadows, I wondered, if this happened to you, if someone powerful and dangerous and broken looked at you like you were the only thing worth saving, would you call it love or survival? Maybe, I thought, it was both. Maybe it always had been. If you felt something in this story, if you've ever stood at the edge of something dangerous and beautiful, tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed? Would you have run? And if you want more stories where love is messy and power is seductive and nothing is ever simple, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning.